Well, welcome to Kepler Conversations. I'm Dr. Scott Postma. Kepler is an online marketplace for classical Christian education, employing the historic university model and leveraging the best available technology. We empower families by liberating teachers to make a classical liberal arts education available, accessible, and affordable. Today, I'm joined by Kepler teacher Joffre Swait. Joffre, welcome.
Thank you. Pleased to be here. Excited.
Glad to see you back, actually. Joffre was our student advisor for several years and now has relegated to doing voiceovers and teaching and all kinds of other things together, right?
That's right. Yeah. A hodgepodge of things, but I'm actually really eager to be back teaching a few classes. It actually feels very strange to be teaching only 3-4 classes at Kepler. I know that's the normal experience. Feels odd, but I'm actually really excited about it.
That's like the weightlifter only doing his warm-up reps now after all that
Right.
you've been working for so long. That's great.
Yeah, exactly right.
Besides teaching, tell us a little bit about what you're involved in these days. I know you're coaching rugby, and I was going to give a big long bio, but maybe we'll just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Actually, at the time of recording here at the end of the academic year, this next Saturday is our championship match for high school. So, yeah, big deal. So when viewers see this, they'll already know if our hearts have been broken or if we have triumphed on the field of battle. But so I've got that going on right now. Of course, that's kind of at its greatest frenzy. But I have a ministry to Brazil. I am originally Brazilian through my church, so I spend a good amount of time with that. I write a lot, and so I actually have a textbook coming up soon from Roman Roads Media on the rhetoric of poetry called Word Hoard. So that's and actually I have a poetry show this week at a local event. It's gonna be poetry for men. So one of the other things I do is I stay active as a poet.
Oh, fantastic! Well, just for the Moscow viewers, where will that be located?
It'll be at the Refuge, which is a cigar lounge. That'll be this Thursday, and we'll just. I think I called it something ridiculous like macho poetry or something like that. But yeah, just have a good time together.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a great time. Well, I want to ask a few questions if I could, and just to kind of give some of our viewers a little bit of background understanding about your own background. And so some of our teachers were homeschooled themselves. Some of them homeschooled their kids. Some of them went to public school and learned about classical education. What's your educational background?
Yeah, so I actually was homeschooled. So I have a very mixed background. I grew up in Brazil, in the States, hither, thither, and yon. Both of my parents also raised multiculturally, I guess you could say. But when we moved to North America, this was the early 90s. My parents were quite shocked at the state of things. And there was this obscure movement going on with a lot of the people who were going along with this movement were also participating in this movement, were also making, say, strange dietary choices. And, it was early days, pioneering spirit. But my parents decided to homeschool me. So I started out in California. Half of my co-op was hippies, and, none of them could read. And it was brutal. I was like, is this what we're signing up for? And then the other half were evangelicals of a lot of different kind of stripes in California, and so we just got a taste of those pioneering days right away. My mom ended up leading this co-op, and I was like my friend and I were the first homeschoolers accepted to our college, etc. So it wasn't like the very earliest days, but it was still the days when you wouldn't go outside in case a police officer saw you out during the school day.
Right.
And then we homeschooled our own kids. So we've been doing that. And of course, as we have 3 now who are done with high school. But like with everything else that God blesses, going from strength to strength, homeschooling has become so much more than those early hard scrabble days. And so things like Kepler, we've used Kepler, we've used some local co-ops, and we definitely have embraced homeschooling in Christian community, which I think is what homeschooling is ideally, right? The family taking responsibility for their family's education, but not limiting themselves in taking that responsibility.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because when I think about those early days of trying to figure out what homeschooling is or what it isn't, there's a lot of conversation about homeschooling, home-centered schooling. And at that time, like you said, it was kind of weird for a lot of people. But it's sort of like a frog in the kettle situation, right? Where you said your family comes in, they're shocked at the state of things, and everybody else has just been kind of warming up to it for so many
Right.
years. But the whole homeschooling movement now has grown, and a lot of families who did not have a homeschooled education, and in particular classical Christian education, are looking for resources and helps. And so you mentioned things like Kepler, that your family has used. Um, why Kepler for you as a teacher? What matters about Kepler that you would be a teacher on this platform?
Well, I like that Kepler has such a disciply oral approach to teaching, right? So it's Socratic dialogue, it's back and forth. I think that one of the things that, I mean, we're not going to have time, say, to unpack here in a short video, but the AI crisis that everyone is panicking about. I mean, the good education with good teachers is always going to be able to solve challenges like that. And so I like the idea of teaching at Kepler because I have the freedom to be a good teacher and to teach by connecting with the students, by talking with them, having dialogue back and forth, hearing what they have to say, um, as opposed to having to focus on making sure that I have my long list of check boxes that I have to get into, admin, etc. Obviously, there is admin, etc. with Kepler, but philosophically, Kepler is very much oriented toward empowering the teacher to teach well.
Yeah.
And so I like being, and that's actually why I put my kids in at Kepler as well. In the past, is that we can trust that our teachers will have that back and forth, will steer our kids and not simply check boxes with our kids. So I like being able to have that freedom myself.
But I really appreciate that. I don't want to take too much time going this direction, simply because, as you mentioned, there could be a lot. But one of the things that's always impressed me about your teaching style is the oral tradition that you often lean on. And given the state of with AI and everybody's panicking over all of this, can you talk just for a moment about it? I don't want to take too much time to take away from talking about your classes, but I would love to hear a little bit about your philosophy there and why that would serve families well.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's always important to encourage the students to be able to take ownership of everything themselves and to be able to formulate things themselves. And of course, there's that truism, right? If you can't explain something, then you don't understand it, right? And so then what I have always tried to do, and with the emergence of AI, and I'm actually I took a year off, so I'm kind of coming back into this, and I'm hopeful to be able to talk to you off camera at some point about how to match some of what I'd like to do. But I've always had uh, I've always leaned on putting the student on the spot, not surprising them. They know it's coming, right? But putting them on the spot and making them explain the thing. They may have a 3-paragraph essay, they may have a 5-page paper, but what we're really relying on is these 5 minutes you have now to explain to all of us what it was that you wrote, right? What it was that this historian had to say. And so placing the gravity of our learning on the conversation, not just in the Socratic dialogue of I'm I'm revealing and pulling back, and you're getting further and further into it, and you're learning more. That's a wonderful part. But then also now that we're here, can you walk us back out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then actually putting real grades on that.
Yeah. Well, and that in our modern culture, that everything has to be so empirical. For some people, that's scary, because
Yes.
what's the rubric you're using there? But oral exams have been the staple, for most of history. When you
Yes.
look back and think about how assessments were done, and we've moved since the Enlightenment into this, rubric and empirical way of grading. And so I
Well,
love to hear
you mentioned, sorry, you mentioned that I that you had observed before in my own style. That style is important too, because I think one of the reasons that oral exams are so frightening is they do kind of come out of nowhere, even if you know they're coming, right? The only oral thing we did all semester was this oral exam at the end. But if you're actually taking this class where, you know what, every week or two, I have to get up in front of everybody and talk about stuff, then
Yeah.
an oral exam is suddenly a lot less daunting. It's just what we've been doing.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that approach. Well, can you talk a little bit about some of the courses that you're teaching this fall? And I'm excited to see you on the roster again. So love to hear a little bit about these courses.
Yeah. So I'm doing Spanish 1 and 2, and then I'm doing my favorite Old Western culture course, the Christendom, the medievals. Of course, and as soon as I say my favorite, then the other the other courses surge up and complain to us. Say, what about this or that? But at least right now, Christendom is my favorite. And then Fireside Chat, which is really it's not so much a course. I don't know how you would define it. Oh, pardon me, but it's just a chance to talk great ideas in a very loose structure. So Fireside Chat's great, but my Spanish 1 and 2 are principally based on worksheets that I've put together myself. And I have very much an oral focus. So all my worksheets are kind of geared to prepare you for recitation. And then in recitation, we have conversation. So I've got both levels of that. And I will say that my Spanish 1 will get you through what in many other places might be a Spanish 1 and 2. So a lot of that will depend on your level of engagement, of course. So the credits given is it's 1 credit. But the families and the students who are lovers of knowledge and good things can just take joy in knowing that this course will take you far. Yeah.
So Spanish 1 and 2, what if Spanish 1 is covering somewhat, could be a 1 and 2, how does Spanish 2 work? What do you guys get into literature, or do you have a different approach? What does Spanish 2 look like?
Yeah, a little bit. So with Spanish 2, the worksheets that so I'll talk about my worksheets briefly, but the worksheets kind of continue. But suddenly there are more materials that you're going to need, and these materials will, I think, be reflective of the change. So there's a 1960 Bible that we'll only have dabbled in Spanish 1. In Spanish 2, we dive right in, and then the selected odes of Pablo Neruda. So we get into a little poetry, and we have there's a whole unit on poetry in the second semester that the students can dive into. So that students do dive into. So there's kind of a combination of readers and poetry and scripture, where it starts to get slightly more literary, but the emphasis is still on conversation.
Okay. So in
Yeah.
terms of prerequisites, would somebody that's coming into your Spanish 2 be equipped to take it if they've taken Spanish 1 already? And if somebody wants to take Spanish 1, do they need to have any kind of background in Spanish at all?
To take my Spanish 1, no background at all. I definitely encourage families to consider whether or not the language requirement is simply a checklist, and that's okay. We don't need to dive into all the whys and wherefores, and states tell you have to check a box. If that's what it is, your family's not gonna, your child is not going to necessarily relish my Spanish one. Okay. So just putting that out there, but you don't need any background. You can come with zero language experience, zero experience of Spanish, no problem at all. In Spanish too, I would say that if you got a good grade in any Spanish one, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I would also encourage families just to make an appointment with me, and we can explore. So if we're not sure, we can just talk it out. And I'm confident that whether the student ends up in a Spanish 1 or a Spanish 2, if they studied a little bit of Spanish before, very soon we'll be studying new and beautiful and useful things. So so I would just say I would encourage the families to talk to me.
Excellent. I'll make sure that all of the contacts are in the show notes so that you can get a hold of Mr. Swait if you have questions about either of his Spanish classes. Now, you mentioned a moment ago that Christendom is your favorite, and I sort of resonate with what you're saying, where there are different elements of each of those years that just really stand out. Talk about Christendom for just a moment. What will students be covering in this integrated humanities class?
Yeah, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, you know, an integrated humanities class where you have history, you have literature, you have theology, philosophy, all kind of taught as one, or taught at once. And it's 1,000 years really that we're that we're covering in Christendom.
In 1 year.
You know, but we start, you know, we start at the beginning of, you know, of a new church, a new Rome, a new Germanic post-Roman civilization, and you know, men like Augustine are handing off the torch to men like Boniface, like Anselm of Beck, and we just go all the way to the Reformation. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the course is, I mean, just like kind of Western Christendom itself, it is this almost carnival of just exploding backgrounds, languages, cultures, and it's all unified. It's all, you know, it's all kind of and we have this tendency, I think, which is sort of a negative tendency, to funnel everything to, so that, oh, this is more like me, this is more like me. And we study history, and it's like, well, I like 20th century history best because that's the thing that's closest to me, the most like me. So one of the things I really appreciate about Christendom is that, you know, Christians can look there and see themselves, but they also see a whole lot of variation and even alienness. And it's the same family. You feel that, but there's just a breadth of experience that the students can, and even like with what it is you're studying, there's a breadth of experience. So, you know, hardcore apologetics, like, let's you know, how do we know there is a God? You know, rigorous philosophical texts, or adventure stories as we sail west across the Atlantic, or war stories as we, you know, as we invade North Africa, or whatever exciting thing there is. It is all sorts of different kinds of texts. Canterbury Tales, you know, we end up in the Reformation, and Spencer, considering Spencer as a Reformation text is a wild thing to do, and yet it's the best thing to do. So a great course.
Well, and just so our audience understands that, you know, this is a 3-credit course: primary source reading, history, philosophy, theology, literature, as Joffre mentioned. So extremely rich, and that's why it's a 3-credit course that covers 3 different you know, subject matters for a high school student, and it's a brilliant class, and then all centered around that Socratic dialogue in class.
Yes.
And some writing and things. But
oh
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please. No,
I know we're kind of running short on time, but you know, this course, there's one text from Erasmus in it as it's normally designed, Julius Exclusus. Desiderius Erasmus, not really thought of as a reformational figure. I am a Reformed Christian. And so you might think, well, okay, so Erasmus and Leo the Tenth and the Council of Trent. So Kepler, of course, is a mere Christian platform. I am going to teach as the Christian that I am. But one of the things that I really relish about this course throughout, and the Reformation unit is a good way of illustrating it. It shows just the wild diversity of the moment, right? Erasmus never left the Roman Church, and yet he was a reformational figure, right? And when we consider the age of exploration, men like Columbus, they existed around the same time as men like Luther, and that matters, and it is all connected. And so the opportunity to study that is just a blast, and to watch someone that you consider like not a Protestant figure making fun of a pope, may reset your mind. And then when you read Canterbury Tales, you'll remember that as you're reading Canterbury Tales. Anyway, very, very exciting course, and I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. It's super fun in that context. We used to call them proto reformers, right? These guys that are,
Yes.
they are reformational in their thinking. Last class that we want to talk a moment about, which to me is one of the funnest. It seems like it's not serious, and yet I've had some of the greatest, most in-depth conversations with students ever in fireside chat. And this is one we often talk about. Drawing from what Wes Callahan used to say, the rabbit trail is the point. Can you talk a little bit about what this class is like?
Yeah, I mean, so this is actually my first time leading a class like this, but I have plenty to say about it. Because so you've taught fireside chat before. We've had another Mr. Nance has taught this course before, and even calling it a course, it is a conversation, like very purposefully conversation. Do fairies exist? Is Plato or Aristotle better? Like trying to answer the unanswerable. And so the conversations really are the point. But for me, so I was eager to take this on when it was offered because of my time as the student life coordinator, right? And seeing what a rich thing in the lives of students conversations like this had, or what a rich thing they were. And in fact, with these specific courses, the fireside chats, hearing the students talking with each other online in the Slack or whatever about how great it was to attack this topic or take this other topic on, and watching the echoes of the conversations resonate through the week, right? So I've seen what a blessing this focus this course is for students. So I'm just happy to pick up the torch for it this year, and I know we're gonna have great conversations. And people, if you look at the description of the course, is it sinful to be depressed? Do fairies exist? Are Marvel movies losing the golden touch? Et cetera, et cetera. These are just notions, right? It's not like that's on the list of things to talk about. These are just conversations that have been had, and who knows where the conversation is going to lead this year.
And they go in all kinds of places, and really they always go back to those perennial human questions that you're asking, that you're always looking for in text. So it's a joy. Well, I'm looking forward to your classes getting filled up this year, and seeing what the students are going to get. I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there any final words, anything you want to leave with us before we go?
Nothing in particular, just that I hope and I believe I have conveyed my genuine excitement, especially talking about it, Chris, and I've got my heart rate up a little bit. Y'all, this is how I teach.
This is great.
And so, gird your loins and come on into the Zoom room and let's do this thing.
This is fantastic. Well, Joffre also has a rhetoric of poetry textbook and anthology forthcoming from Roman Roads Press. He mentioned a moment ago. It's titled The Word Hoard. And you can also find him on Substack by the same name. All of the links to where you can contact and ask him questions will be in the show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in, and come by Kepler.education. Sign up for some fantastic courses this fall. Thanks, Joffrey.
Thanks.